Hello, good morning, students. Today we are going to do a chapter from our English textbook, Treasure Trove. In fact, we are going to revise this chapter. We have already done this earlier, but let's do it again. Chief Seattle's speech, an authentic text of Chief Seattle's treaty oration, 1854. You know when is the treaty signed? After a war or before a war begins. It's a peace treaty. Chief Seattle, something about Chief Seattle. Chief Seattle was a Native American chief, a member of the Squamish tribe, and a prominent figure among his people who pursued a path of accommodation and reconciliation with white settlers. The following is a widely publicized speech attributed to Chief Seattle, in which he argues with gentle irony in favor of ecological responsibility and respect of Native Americans' beliefs, traditions, and land rights. Although what he actually said may have been lost through translation and rewriting, the speech or letter attributed to Chief Seattle has been widely cited as a powerful, bitter, sweet plea for respect of Native American rights and environmental values. The city of Seattle, in the state of Washington, in the USA, is named after him. Chief Seattle's speech, authentic text of Chief Seattle's treaty oration, 1854. Yonder sky that has wept tears of compassion upon my people for centuries untold, and which to us appears changeless and eternal, may change. Today is fair, tomorrow it may be overcast with clouds. My words are like the stars that never change. Whatever Seattle says, the great chief at Washington can rely upon with as much certainty as he can upon the return of the sun or the seasons. The white chief says that big chief at Washington sends us greeting of friendship and goodwill. This is kind of him, for we know he has little need of our friendship in return. His people are many. They are like the grass that covers the vast prairies. My people are few. They resemble the scattering trees of a storm-swept plain. The great, and I presume good, white chief sends us word that he wishes to buy our land, but is willing to allow us enough to live comfortably. This indeed appears just, even generous, for the red man no longer has rights that he need respect, and the offer may be wise also, as we are no longer in need of an extensive country. So the chief, pointing to the sky, yonder means far away, that distance, pointing to a distant sky, he says that sky has shed tears of compassion, means the sky is a witness to the suffering that the red people, the Native Americans, have gone through the centuries untold. And he says that sky may be looking uh, uh, unchangeable. The sky may appear as if it's not changing and it's eternal, but the sky too may change. He says the weather today is fine, tomorrow it may be covered with clouds and they might be windy, but he says his words, if he gives a promise, my words are like the stars that never change. He says his words are unchangeable. That means if he makes a promise, he will stick to his promise. He is at the same time grateful to the chief from Washington, the white chief, the British chief, who sent word of a friendly gesture. They are sent greetings of goodwill, greetings of friendship. So he welcomes the attitude. He welcomes the sign of friendship, the sign of goodwill from the white chief. But he says the feelings of the Reds should also be respected. He says his peoples are many. Whose peoples are many? The white chief's people are many. Why? Because there are so many whites. They were invading one after the other into the Reds territory. This Reds territory, the Native Americans were the Red Indians. The white settlers came and settled in America as they came and settled in different parts of Asia. So also they went to America. And at that time, the Americans, they were living in tribes. They were warrior tribes. There were many tribal people living in America, and they used to always be in war with one another. And they had the traditional weapons of bows and arrows and axes. But these white settlers, they came with guns, and they began to massacre the Native Americans. So, having the white sending a friendship request to the Reds was a surprise for the Reds, for Chief Seattle. And Chief Seattle, he willingly accepts the friendship, but he has his own terms and condition. What terms and condition he has, we'll come to know later in the chapter. There was a time when our people covered the land as the wave of a wind ruffled sea covers its shell paved floor. But that time long since passed away, with the greatness of tribes that are now but a mournful memory. I will not dwell on, nor mourn over our untimely decay, nor reproach my pale faced brothers for hastening it, as we too may have been somewhat to blame. So the chief says there was a time when the red people, the native people, covered this prairies. Prairies means this grassland of America is called as prairies. There was a time when they covered this area as if the wind ruffled sea covers a shelf paved floor. As the ocean covers the seashore, in the same way, the chiefs people, the Native American, were once upon a time ruling over this area. But he says that is a mournful memory now. That time has gone. And he says, I will not dwell upon, I will not keep pondering upon how great a number we were. Now, though we have decayed, we have the people of the Reds people have died off. So he says this was an untimely decay. It was not expected that they would die so fast. But he says, I would not reproach my pale-faced brothers. Who are the pale-faced brothers here? The pale-faced brothers are the white people, because the color is fair. They don't have that tanny color, tan or brown color. So he calls them as pale-faced brothers. My pale-faced brothers, with hastening it, means they are not the only reason why the Reds have diminished in number. We too may have been somewhat to blame. He says, कहीं ना कहीं हमारी भी कुछ ना कुछ गलती होगी. Youth is impulsive. When our young men grow angry at some real or imaginary wrong and disfigure their faces with black paint, it denotes that their hearts are black and that they are often cruel and relentless, and our old men and old women are unable to restrain them. So what is the mistake of the red people? He said they are very youthful. The youth of the red people, they are very impulsive. Youth, the young boys and young girls, they get angry very fast and they tend to react very fast because their blood is bubbling with energy. So what do? When they get angry, they want to have revenge. They paint their faces with black paints and they wage war against the opponents. So they are often cruel and relentless, and our old men and women are unable to restrain them. The old men and women, they are unable to control these people. Thus it has ever been, thus it was when the white man began to push our forefathers eastwards. But let us hope that the hostilities between us may never return. So this has been for centuries, and it continues even today when the whites are pushing the reds westwards. Now, why the whites pushing the reds westwards? The Western America was a desert region, and east and the remaining part of America was a grassland, fertile grassland. So these white people were in search of good land. This was a time of expanding of territory. This was a time of imperialism, and they were trying to dominate the others. The Europeans were under misimpression, under the wrong impression that they were the only civil people. They were the only people who had civility, and they wanted to extend the civility to the different parts of the world. So here also in America they tried to civilize the Native Americans. Thus it was when the white man began to push our forefathers ever westward. But let us hope that the hostilities between us may never return. We would have everything to lose and nothing to gain. Revenge by young men is considered gain even at the cost of their own lives. But old men who stay at home in times of war and mothers who have sons to lose know better. Okay, so for the young people, they say that मरेंगे तो क्या हम 10 को लेकर मारेंगे. That is their intention. They only want revenge, and revenge even at the cost of their own lives. But the people that they leave behind, their parents, their children, they who mourn for them, they know what the real loss is. A good father in Washington. Now, who is the good father in Washington? Perhaps King George. So he is referring to King George as a good father in Washington, for I presume he is now our father as well as yours, since King George has moved his boundaries further north. So yes, he is referring to King George. He says he is their father as well as the father of the white people, the father of the red as well as the father of the white people, because he has moved his territory further north. That means they presume that whoever rules them is their father. The king is the fatherly figure for the subjects. So, for I presume he is now our father as well as yours, since King George has moved his boundaries further north. Our great and good father, I say, sends us word that we do as he desires, he will protect us. So what is the condition that the King George is sending them? That if they do as he desires, the king in return will see that the reds are protected. Now, from who is King George going to protect the people of Chief Seattle? He is going to protect them against the whites as well as against some of the red tribes. So these tribal people, they were constantly at war with one another. They were actually cattle raiders. Whoever owned more cattle was considered a very rich person. So each tribe used to try and steal as much cattle, as much buffaloes of the other, buffaloes and horses of the other tribe. So the white chief, that is King George, assures them that if they support King George, if they don't fight with King George is willing to protect them from the other tribal people. I say, sends us word that if we do as he desires, he will protect us. His brave warriors will be to us a bristling wall of strength, and his wonderful ships of war will fill our harbors, so that our ancient enemies far to the northward, the Hydias and the Shimshians, will cease to frighten our women, children and old men. So he mentions two of the tribes from which he fears attack, the Hydias and the Shimshians. These are the two tribes from which Chief Seattle fears that King Washington will protect his people. The Hydias and the Shimshians will cease to frighten our women, children and old men. Then in reality, we will be our father. Then in reality, he will be our father and we his children. But can that ever be? Your God is not our God. Your God loves your people and hates mine. So he has a question in mind. Can they be brothers after all? Why can they not be brothers? Because there's a vast difference in the reds and in the whites. The culture that they follow, the religion that they follow is very, very different. So he wonders whether they can ever be brothers, they can ever be friends, because their God is not the God of the red people. The red people do not worship the same God as the white peoples do. Your God loves your people and hates mine. Now, why does he feel that the God of the white people hates the red people? Because he feels that the God of the white people is supporting the white people in their war, and the white people are winning victories upon victories, one after the other. So he feels that the God is partial, he is only helping the white people. Your God is not our God. Your God loves your people and hates mine. He folds his strong protecting arms lovingly about the pale face and leads him by the hand as a father leads an infant son. See what he says, that the white people, God is guiding them in war and leading them to victory. He is comparing God to a father, a loving father who holds the child's hand and guides him and leads him to safety. He has, but he has forsaken his red children, if they really are his. Our God, the Great Spirit, seems also to have forsaken us. So the red chief, Chief Seattle, says that neither is the white gods helping the red people, and neither is the red's God helping the red people. They are forsaken. He feels that he is an orphan without any protection. Our God, the Great Spirit, seems also to have forsaken us. Your God makes your people wax stronger every day. Soon they will fill all the land. Our people are ebbing away like a rapidly receding tide that will never return. So he compares his people, the downfall of his people, the number of losses of his people, to that of a low tide, the sea whose water recedes further into the depths. So he says, our people are like the tide that is receding, but the difference is when the tide comes back, the water is covered again on the shore, but the red people, when they die, they may not come back again. The white man's God cannot love our people, or he would have protected them. They seem to be orphans who can look nowhere for help. How then can we be brothers? How can your God become our God and renew our prosperity and awaken in us dreams of returning greatness? If we have a common heavenly Father, he must be partial, for he came to his pale faced children. We never saw him. So he is taking out his desperation on God. He feels that how can God be one? He is reluctant to believe that there is only one God. If he says there is one God, then this one God is very, very partial. He is helping only his white faced children, pale faced children, and he is not coming to the rescue of the red faced children. Because every time there is a war, it is the reds who are losing many, many soldiers, many of his brave warriors. It is the white who is coming out victorious. So, how can God be a single God? Definitely, it is the white God who is helping the white people. So, there cannot be only one God. There has to be more than one God according to Chief Seattle, and that is why they cannot be brothers. When he came to the rescue of his pale faced children, we never saw him. He gave you laws, but had no word for his red children, whose teeming multitudes once fill the vast continent as stars fill the firmament. No, we are two distinct races with separate origins and separate destinies. There is little in common between us. So he says that they cannot be brothers because they are destined to be different. They are two different races with different destinies, and there's nothing or there is very little that is common between them, because the white people, they God has given them certain laws to be followed. Perhaps he's referring to the 10 commandments that Moses, when he came down from Mount Sinai, he had brought a slab of stone on which the commandments were written by the finger of God. That means God himself had given them the commandments to follow. To us, the ashes of our ancestors are sacred, and the resting place is a hallowed ground. You wander far from the graves of your ancestor, and seemingly without regret. Your religion was written upon tablets of stone by the iron finger of your God, so that you could not forget. The red man could never comprehend or remember it. Our religion is the traditions of our ancestors, the dreams of our old men, given them in solemn hours of the night, the Great Spirit and the vision of our sachems, and is written in the hearts of our people. So, how are the whites and the reds different? See, for the red people, even the ashes and the hallowed ground and the resting place, the place where the graves are there of the red people, is a hallowed ground, is a holy place for them. It's a place of reverence for them. But it seems that the white people, they don't bother about the dead, about their dead. They tend to leave their own native place and wander far away from them. He again compares, he says, your religion was written upon the tablets, upon stone slabs with the iron finger of your God, but we don't have such written rules, because he says they God never gave them any rules. Perhaps they would not be able to comprehend, they would not be able to remember all the rules. It is through tradition and the dreams. When the ancestors come in the dream and tell them what to do, they believe that the great spirits, they come in the vision of the sachems, and whatever is written in the heart of the people. They don't have any rules written in a book or in slabs, but it is their ancestors who appear to them in their dream and from time to time guide them, and whatever rules that come into their heart stays with them forever. Your dead cease to love you and the land of the nativity as soon as they pass the portals of the tomb and wander away beyond the stars. Another comparison he makes that the dead people also tend to forget the living people. The dead white people tend to forget the living white people, and as soon as they are put in the grave, they tend to proceed towards heaven. Whereas the reds people, their souls keep coming back time and again. Whenever the red people are in difficulty, the souls of the spirit of the red, the dead red, they come and guide the living red people. Your dead cease to love you and the land of their nativity as soon as they pass the portals of the tomb and wander away beyond the stars. They are soon forgotten and never return. Our dead never forget this beautiful world that gave them being. They still love its verdant valleys, its murmuring rivers, its magnificent mountains, sequestered vales, and verdant lined lakes and bays, and ever yearn in tender fond affection over the lonely hearted living, and often return from the happy hunting ground to visit, guide, console, and comfort them. That's the difference between the souls of the red people and the soul of the white people. While the soul of the white people is heavenly bound, goes to heaven, the soul of the red people remain on earth and time and again keep visiting the red people. Then he further says, day and night cannot dwell together. Now, who is he comparing as the day and who is he comparing as the night? He compares the day to the white people and the night to the red people. The red man has ever fled the approach of the white man. As the morning mist flees before the morning sun. However, your proposition seems fair, and I think that my people will accept it and will retire to the reservation you offer them. Then we will dwell apart in peace, for the words of the great white chief seem to be the word of nature speaking to my people out of dense darkness. So, Chief Seattle concedes to the proposal. He is giving a hint that he will concede to the proposal of the white chief. He'll say that he will discuss with his people. Here we see the chief is a very democratic type of a chief. He does not take decisions on his own. He will consult his people and he feels that his people will accept the proposal of the white because he feels that the white actually is not speaking through him. Through him comes the word of the nature which proposes peace, and they are willing to stay wherever the whites allows the red to live peacefully. We'll give them a territory, and in that territory they are willing to stay. It matters little where we pass the remnant of our days. They will not be many. A sign of resignation. He says that it does not matter where we are, whether you take the most fertile land of their people and send them to the desert, towards the desert, it does not matter because he does not see a great future for his people. He says his people are very few and they don't require such huge territory. It matters little where we pass the remnant of our days, they will not be many. The Indians' night promises to be dark. Who are the Indians here? The Native Americans are the Indians, the Red Indians. Indians means tribal, the tribal people. Not a single star of hope hovers above his horizon. Sad voiced winds moan in the distance. Grim fate seems to be on the red man's trial. And whenever and wherever he will hear the approaching footsteps of his fell destroyer and prepare stolidly to meet his doom, as does the wounded doe that hears the approaching footsteps of the hunter. The tone of the chief is very, very resigned. He has given up that he would ever be able to win a battle against the white people. He says his fate is very grim and he feels as if he is the hunted deer and the white man is the hunter. He compares the red people to a deer which is wounded, and the hunter will easily make out where this person is hiding, where this deer is hiding, and the deer's death at the hands of the hunter is inevitable. So he only has to wait when the hunter will come and kill the deer. In the same way, he feels that the reds have no future at all. Sooner or later, they are going to perish. They are going to diminish completely from the face of the earth. So it doesn't matter where they spend their last days. A few more moons, a few more winters, and not one of the descendants of the mighty host that once moved over this broad land or lived in happy homes protected by the Great Spirit will remain to mourn over the graves of a people once more powerful and hopeful than yours. Again, the same sad tone is carried forward by the chief. He says a few more moons, matlab few more seasons. One moon is of 14 days. The moonly month, okay, the full moon to new moon and new moon to full moon. So he says a few more moons, a few more winters. winters again seasons. So the white people, they follow the calendar of the season. They count the years by how many winters they have seen, how many summers they have seen. A few more moons, a few more winters, and not one of the descendants of the mighty host. Who the mighty host? The red people. The host and the guest. The host are the people who are staying there, and the whites are the one who have come over here. So he calls himself and his people as the mighty host that once moved over this broad land or lived in happy homes, protected by his great spirit, by the great spirit, will remain to mourn over the graves of a people once more powerful and hopeful than yours. So he says that soon a day will come when all the reds would perish. Not a single red man would be standing alive to mourn on the graves of the red. But why should I mourn at the untimely fate of my people? Tribe follows tribe, and nation follows nation. Like the waves of the sea, it is the order of nature, and regret is useless. So he says this is destined to happen. It's very similar, like when we see a sea on, we go to a shore, we can see that one wave is following the other wave, and that is the law of nature. If we see our history, if you see the dynasties ruling over India, there's so many dynasties. There's so many different dynasties that has ruled over India. Then came the Mughals, then came the Britishers, and now the politicians. So it is destined that there will be changes. So he says, tribe follows tribe and nation follows nation. Like the waves of the great sea, it is the order of nature, and regret is useless. Your time of decay may be distant, but it will surely come. Even the whites who are now so powerful, he says, your time of decay, your time of death also will come. But it may be distance, it will come. For even the white man God who walked and talked with them as friend to friend cannot be exempt from the common destiny. So the common destiny that they have is death. We may be brothers, after all, we will see. Okay, so today we'll stop here. We'll continue from here in the next class.